some of the circumstances that might drive the sale of an ESOP-owned company? And while there are a number of unique reasons why an ESOP-owned company might be contemplating a sale, we typically find that it's not just one, but rather usually a number of factors working together. So the first item here is an unsolicited offer. And we often find that a lot of ESOP companies have a rich tradition of operating as an ESOP, and they really don't think about selling until an offer is presented to them, either by a competitor perhaps, or maybe a private equity firm. And oftentimes this is a key stopping point that might allow management and the board to consider a sale. Another driver is a non-ESOP majority shareholder. So this would be a circumstance where the ESOP owns a minority piece of the business and the majority shareholder is looking for a liquidity event. And to the extent that the ESOP is a minority shareholder, they may often be dragged along in a sale process. So in this case, it might be the majority shareholder driving the process, but of course, it's still in the best interest of the ESOP to work towards a fair and successful deal on behalf of those ESOP participants. Next, you have a host of market conditions and industry dynamics to consider, and these typically go hand in hand with one another. Examples of these might include an industry that is experiencing rapid consolidation, where a company may fear that if they don't strike a deal, it could really hurt the longevity of the company's performance. This might also include industries where buyers are being very active, and the higher level of interest is likely to drive up pricing multiples for companies in that particular space. And because of this, it might make sense, or maybe more interesting, for an ESOP-owned company to pursue a sale process. And then lastly, you can have a host of some of those company-specific issues. And just to touch upon a few of these, starting with management succession issues. So typically at the founding of an ESOP, the management team is very strong, and they have a plan to operate the company for the foreseeable future. But just like any other company, management succession planning is very important. And to the extent that there isn't a bench of those next leaders within the organization, or it's difficult to find someone appropriately qualified to come in from the outside, it might make sense to pursue a sale process. M&A growth strategy. Sometimes an ESOP-owned company might realize that if they are going to meaningfully grow in their particular market, they might need to execute an M&A growth strategy, though this often might be hard to do on their own, given a lack of resources or experience in-house. And so in these cases, it might make sense for a company to partner with a private equity firm or to go out and acquire firms in their industry. All right, well, here we'll cover some of the pros and cons of selling an ESOP company, and you really want to go into the process with your eyes wide open and have a good understanding of what you might expect. So on the positives, the first is pretty obvious, being there's a potential to cash out at a lucrative and high valuation. Second, there's the ability to gain liquidity and fund retirement accounts. And as an ESOP-owned company, once the company is sold, there's going to be a funding of retirement accounts, which can often be a sum of money that is very meaningful to participants. Third, there's a diversification from the risk of a single employer security. While an ESOP can be a great benefit for participants, it's certainly a bit riskier given a lot of someone's wealth might be tied up to the performance of one company. So it might be advantageous for participants to be able to quote unquote cash out of their ESOP and perhaps move their proceeds to more diversified long-term investments. Selling also reduces holding risk. If you're selling your company today, you're taking your chips off the table, which prevents any risk of value deterioration of the company going forward. And then the last bullet, strategic partnership opportunities and added capabilities, kind of playing into what we discussed on the previous slide. Maybe it's a case where you've done all you can and you really need to find a new partner to move the company forward in a strategic manner. Like anything else, where there's positives, there's negatives, and this can be the case for selling an ESOP company as well. ESOP-owned companies, by their nature, typically develop a very strong culture, which can be a point of pride for the management team and its employees. So there is potential that after a sale process, there may be a sort of changing of the guard that perhaps might disrupt some of that unique culture. There's also potential for loss of jobs or consolidation of operations, as is always the risk with any M&A transaction. This is probably more of an issue if you are selling to a strategic buyer or a competitor of yours. Oftentimes, a strategic buyer is able to pay premium and give a favorable valuation for your business, but often baked into that valuation is the assumption that they can consolidate some functions or eliminate duplicative jobs. So certainly an important factor to consider before moving forward. Then the next one, opposite of holding risk, there is some potential loss of long-term equity upside if you were to sell today. So certainly want to extract as much value as possible at time of sale. And you can do this by putting together thoughtful and defendable projections for the buyer for valuation consideration, such that you extract that long-term upside of the business at close in the form of a strong purchase price. And then the last two risks are really part of any M&A process, and that's M&A closing risk as well as confidentiality risk. Both of these risks can be mitigated by running a thoughtful process, but it is important to understand that it can be a long and tough process with pretty intense buyer due diligence, where a lot of information is going to be needed to be shared with potential buyers.